start in Matthew chapter 15, and we're going to start in verse 21. I guess before I do that, last week when we kind of ended everything, I did kind of pose that question because we're talking about the Pharisees and how you have light and you have darkness, and oftentimes light is going to offend the darkness. And so I asked the question, is it our job to offend people? Is that our job, to go out and try to offend people? So what did y'all come up with? This is just a little side thing before we get into the other thing. Is that what we're supposed to be doing? Going out trying to offend everybody? No? Yeah. And I think the idea, or my idea of it is anyway, that I think if we're doing the things we're supposed to be doing, we're going to offend people just because people tend to get offended whenever, like I said, light tends to offend darkness. So I think it's going to happen, but yeah, I don't think we're supposed to just go out there and just try to offend everybody and make everybody mad. So I figure we're all on the same page with that, but since I left off with that, I figured probably should at least mention it before we move on. Okay, so Matthew chapter 15, starting in verse 21. All right. And Jesus went away from there and withdrew to the district of Tyre and Sidon. And behold, a Canaanite woman from that region came out and was crying, "Have mercy on me, O Lord, Son of David. My daughter is severely oppressed by a demon." But he did not answer her a word. And his disciples came and begged him, saying, "Send her away, for she is crying out after us." He answered, "I was sent only to the lost sheep of the house of Israel." But she came and knelt before him, saying, "Lord, help me." And he answered, "It is not right to take the children's bread and throw it to the dogs." She said, "Yes, Lord, yet even the dogs eat the crumbs that fall from their master's table." Then Jesus answered her, "O woman, great is your faith. Be it done for you as you desire." And her daughter was healed instantly. Does anybody else have a problem with this passage? I don't know. This is a troubling paragraph for me, or has been a troubling paragraph for me. I mean, this is one of the hardest things that I've read in Scripture because it challenges me about Jesus, about his mission, about what I expect. I mean, it's tough. And it's tough because here is a woman coming on behalf of her demon-possessed daughter. And, he's cast demons out of people. Even now, before as we've read through Matthew, we've seen him casting demons out of people. She calls him the Son of David. I mean, it seems like she's given him some proper due and more than some of the other people. I'm thinking about maybe the folks in Nazareth where he grew up who weren't having it, who wouldn't recognize him in that way. They even want to push him off a cliff and things like that. So it's not selfishness. It's not that she's coming angrily or anything like that. I mean, she's not asking him to do anything that he hasn't done before. And it says he did not answer her a word. And then the disciples are speaking up, but evidently she's been so persistent that they're even they're coming to him, and it says begging him to just send her away, get rid of her, send her away. And so they don't come to him on her behalf, which is also kind of interesting, that they don't come to take up for her. They don't take up for her. They don't want her hanging around either. And he won't give her what she wants. And then, when he finally does talk to her, it seems like he calls her a dog. And that's what it looks like to me, right? It's like he's calling her a a dog. And this just seems so unlike the Jesus that I've been reading about or understanding up until now. You know, and again, one of the things we find is Jesus doesn't always fit inside of our Jesus box, if you will. He doesn't always fit inside this little nice little neat package that we've kind of developed for him. But I have these preconceived ideas, and I think I bolster a lot of evidence from the scriptures about these ideas, and yet here is this account, here is this portion of scripture that's just as true as all the rest of it, and yet causes me to pause and say, well, before I make assumptions about Jesus, I really better get close to the Word and study it well. So let's begin by saying, at the very least, this is an exceptional circumstance. At the very least, this is an exceptional circumstance. I mean, there's a reason why we'd say this story and the way Jesus behaves in this story doesn't fit inside of our Jesus box. Right? There's a reason we would say that. And it's really not because of preconceived ideas. It's because of everything else that we have read about him. This doesn't seem to quite fit the norm. All right? This is an exceptional occurrence. It'd be one thing if every other page of these Gospels accounts had Jesus talking to people in this way. But that's not what we see. And so this is exceptional. Now, he does do it. He does it, and we have to deal with that. We've got to figure out what's going on here. But at the very least, let's begin with this is exceptional. This is an exceptional circumstance. This is not the norm. So, one of the things that I kind of find exceptional here is found in verse 21. In verse 21, it says, "And Jesus went away from there and withdrew to the district of Tyre and Sidon." And so, when you get the map out, and you look at that, again, geography is not my strong suit, but when you get the map out and you look at that, we see that this is a bit of a travel, leaving the surrounding area of Galilee to head up to traditionally Gentile territory, the Gentile areas. And that brings up a question for me. He's going to Gentile regions, and when he gets there, he's going to make a big deal about the fact that I'm not here for Gentiles. Why would he do that? Why would he do that? Now, he does say, "I have come for the lost sheep of Israel," which perhaps he's gone to speak to the Jewish communities that are in those regions, like the scattered Jews, those who are out among the Gentiles and so forth. Perhaps that's what he's doing. He's heading outside the region of the Jews, ostensibly to find lost sheep of Israel. And so, I wonder if this is kind of like a picture of the shepherd leaving the 99 to go find the one, that kind of an idea, going out to find these Jews that are scattered out among the Gentiles. And I think of John chapter 10 and verse 16. In John chapter 10 and verse 16, where Jesus says that he has other sheep that are not of this fold, which maybe when folks first heard that, they thought that he was talking about these scattered Jews. But as the gospel unfolds and as the New Testament unfolds, we realize that he's actually talking about Gentiles. So there's something here in this very exceptional circumstance. And it makes me wonder if Jesus isn't acting in a way that the Jews would expect a Jewish Messiah to act. Like maybe this is a satirical response for the benefit of his disciples. Like, this is the way many of you would really kind of expect me to act, with the idea that you had of the Messiah who was coming, King of the Jews. Perhaps this is kind of a little satire, a little demonstration of the way maybe they expect that he should be acting. I'm only here for the lost sheep of Israel, and I'm not going to respond to this Gentile.
Verse 24, but he answered and said, I was sent only to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. Is that true or false?
Yeah, that's right. That's right. That's what the Jews thought, right? But that's a good point.
Jesus says something here that doesn't make a lot of sense to us.
Mm-hmm.
Because what he was bringing, and he kept telling his own people, this is going to be for everyone. Everything's changing.
Yeah.
So I think you're onto something there.
Yeah. So maybe, because that's a really good point. He didn't just come for the house of Israel, but that's what these people are expecting. That's what these people are thinking, and maybe he's kind of using a little satire to be like, well, I'm not gonna, to kind of show them, maybe to kind of demonstrate this is kind of the idea that you have, and maybe how ridiculous it is. I don't know, but what it does is it draws out this exemplary faith. And it shows to the Jews who are monitoring and watching, and especially to these disciples. Remember what we put up with back home? Remember what we saw from the Pharisees? Remember what we saw from the scribes and the Sadducees and the priests? Now I want you to see what we're seeing from some of these Gentiles. And so we have this woman who's coming to Jesus, and she's seeking a miracle. She's seeking a healing for her demon-possessed daughter. And notice what he doesn't do. He doesn't send her away. While he ignores her at first, he doesn't send her away. He allows her to cry after him, to the point that the apostles finally say, would you please send her away? Just rebuke her and send her away. And his first statement may have been, it kind of seems like it's to the apostles there, to the disciples there, but he says, look, I was sent only to the lost sheep of the house of Israel, so I'm not here for her. So whatever she wants to do, I'm not here for her. And then the woman herself comes and pushes her way into his presence, begging and pleading. And then he says, hey, I don't give the children's bread to the dogs. What are you doing here? Back in the Sermon on the Mount, in Matthew chapter 7, in verse 6, he said, don't give what's holy to the dogs. Don't cast your pearls before pigs. So, on the surface, he seems to be following along with that idea. I have what's holy. I have the food that's meant for the children. I don't give that to the dogs. There's a law back in Exodus chapter 22 where it talks about the fact that if you find beasts that have just been killed in the field, you don't eat that. You don't eat that. You give that to the dogs. You give the holy food that's consecrated, that God allows us to eat. We give that to our families. We give that base, defiled, unclean stuff to the dogs. And so he says, it's not right to take the children's bread and throw it to the dogs. And so, I feel like, and y'all can kind of let me know some more of what y'all think, but that's kind of my thought on this up to this point, is that it's kind of a satirical response to kind of maybe show the disciples, to maybe give a demonstration of a contrast from maybe the way they think he ought to have been acting, or many of them think he ought to be acting, to the way he actually is acting, then the way they mostly see him acting, which is, and the way that they would kind of see him acting. This will demonstrate kind of how mean and not good that this is. The way it is seems kind of harsh and kind of ridiculous, but that's kind of my thoughts on just up to this point. That's kind of my thoughts on that. Do y'all have any other thought on that, or do y'all kind of feel like that might be kind of what he's saying there, or why he's saying that?
How would you explain verse 27 when she answers him? And she says that, first of all, true. She said of his statement that was true. And how would you explain the rest of that?
Well, I'm about to get into that, so hold on just a second. So before we get into that section of it, her response to him, what do you guys think? Y'all have any other thoughts on that?
I was just thinking too, if she cried out for a while, she's probably drawing more crowds. People are wondering what's going on over there,
Yeah, could be bringing more attention to the whole thing.
It doesn't tell about anything else he did there either. They went way up there to Tyre and Sidon, but then after this incident, then they're going back.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. So there's some stuff going on here. It's interesting to think about. I remember the first time I read about his response to that, I just was in shock, because I was like, that just doesn't sound like something Jesus would say. I don't remember how old I was. I was kind of younger, but I remember the first time I ever came across that passage, I was just like, I don't know about that. That just doesn't sound right. So.
Well, she wasn't of the people that he was there to help either.
Yeah.
But so many times the greater faith was found outside the camp.
Yes.
And there's a conversation between two equals here. And that sounds odd to say this woman's equal with Jesus, but they're communicating, everybody else is watching.
Mm-hmm.
And I think even like verse 24, where he says, I was sent only to lost sheep, that's not necessarily true. Sent to them first, yes. But he's saying that to draw her out, or to draw the witnesses to this out. But those two are speaking at a different level than everybody else is listening right now.
Yeah. And I'm kind of surprised at the disciples too for their response. They still, they kind of have that idea of, let's get rid of her. that just kind of strikes me as a little funny too. It's kind of like they're still not quite getting the idea of this stuff.
I kind of agree with what Tom is saying. It's a teaching moment, I think, for the disciples here.
Mm-hmm.
And if you look at this woman, what does she call him? She calls Jesus the Son of David. So she knows who she's dealing with here. She also calls him Lord. And it's kind of like she knows who she's talking to. And when you kind of get the point that, if you look back even in the Old Testament, you can see that, even in Psalms it talks about all nations. Not just the Israelite nations. And when you look at Israel itself, they had foreigners in their midst, but they also had to, follow the rules or regulations of the law to become like, part of the nation of Israel, so to speak. And so we were all kind of considered, even as Christians today, we're all considered like, you know, we're not necessarily Jews, but we are descendants of the faith.
So yeah, a lot of.
Go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, it shows the importance of a great faith.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, Jesus saying, "Your faith saved you.
Mm-hmm.
You're, you know, you're okay." And that should be a message to us.
Mm-hmm.
No matter how bad we are, we can be saved.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's a really good thing to hang on to too.
And I think if you look before this, it's talking about, in verse 11, not that which goes into the mouth defiles a man, but that which comes out of the mouth, this defiles a man. So you would be judged by your words, Jesus is saying, not by not washing your hands before you eat.
Mm-hmm.
You know, he's making some things up clear that never were before.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
So,
and what words are coming out of her mouth right now too?
and yes.
Well,
And the
Marcia,
Pharisees were offended,
Mm-hmm.
but she wasn't.
what Marcia said earlier was that he just went there, and this was the only instance of this place in his travels that something is recorded. So it almost tells me like she was the only one he found worthy in that region to actually heal or have something to do with.
Now we know from other scripture and so forth that he does do things that it's not recorded sometimes. I mean, there's all kinds of stuff that he did that we don't know about. But yeah, but as far as what's going on here, yeah, I mean this is something that happens, and then he takes back off and goes back, and so yeah, we'll get into her response a little bit right here. Is yeah, she comes back to him because he says it's not right to take the children's bread and throw it to the dogs. But then she comes back with this amazing thing, and like we talked about it, I don't know if this was necessarily a manufactured situation by Jesus, or if he just knows the heart. He knows what how people are gonna react and things like that. But we've got this situation, and he seems to be driving to this point for her to demonstrate this amazing faith, right? He's getting to this point where she's about to, like all of you have been saying, she's about to get to this point where she's going to be demonstrating this amazing faith. And she says, "Yes, but Lord, even the dogs eat the crumbs that fall from the master's table." Even the dogs get the scraps. Can you please just give me the scraps? I mean, you have such an abundance of goodness and such an abundance of holiness and power. I just need the crumbs. I just need the scraps, right? I mean, everything about her seems to be both humble and persistent. She won't let go. She won't stop. She's driven by love and for the need for her daughter. Her concern and love for her daughter. But she also has this respect for Jesus that nobody else can help. This is the one who can help her. And she's trying to honor him. She's trying to appeal to him in every way. And I'll tell you what this reminds me of. We had a sermon on this, it might have been the beginning of the year by now, time kind of goes, but it reminds me of Jacob. It reminds me of Jacob as he's crossing back into the promised land, and he's prayed to God, and instead of God parting the waters and ushering him through, there's actually an angel or a man of God there. And that man of God wrestles with him all night long. They wrestle all night long. And Jacob says, "I am not letting go." He says, "I want the blessing and I will not let go." And at some point, the man of God touches Jacob's hip socket, and it shrivels up, and now he walks with a limp for the rest of his life, which, by the way, demonstrates that he could have ended that fight at any point. He could have ended it by touching his neck and killing Jacob right then and there, right? But God's not trying to kill Jacob. He's challenging him. He's testing him. And what Jacob does is he hangs on. He hangs on to Jesus and says, I want the blessing. I want the blessing. And now here is this Gentile woman. Here is this Canaanite woman who demonstrates that exact kind of tenacious faith. I know where the blessing can be found, and I'm going to hang on. And it doesn't matter what he says to me. I'm going to wrestle with this man of God. I'm going to wrestle with him, and I'm going to hang on until he gives me the blessing. So here's this Gentile walking in the footsteps of one of the patriarchs, kind of following in that same manner. I'm going to hang on until I get the blessing, because I know where the blessing can be found. I know where it can be found. And this isn't the first time. Who brought up the others in the other Gentiles? This isn't the first time that Matthew's gospel tells us about Gentiles who have been an example of faith, right? And I think about the centurion. The centurion who, what was his deal? He approached Jesus and he sought healing for his servant, right? And you know these Gentiles are serving as examples to the people of Israel. The Messiah has come, and these other people see it. You need to see it too, right? There's kind of that idea of you need to be seeing what these other people are seeing. Look how strong their faith is. Look how strong these Gentiles' faith is. So,
I have another thought.
sure.
When the disciples said, send her away, to me, he actually scolded her because she was not of that house. But then she backed down and showed him how much she did when she bowed. And he wasn't expecting that. That's what I figured. And then she kept coming back with words that he knew that her heart was in the right place, and he finally accepted it.
Well, I think the thing about Jesus is, he kind of knows their heart, and so he can kind of see how
So it was kind of beautiful.
Yeah, and I think you can see how all this stuff is unfolding, like all of y'all have said too, is I think it's setting up as an example to everyone who's around, and it's also giving this woman an opportunity to demonstrate an amazing faith. It kind of challenges her, helps her to show her faith, and also serves as an example to the others around. And so that's kind of what I get from this circumstance. I don't know if y'all have another.
She looks like she was really something that she's been thinking about a long time, praying about or whatever. She came prepared.
Yeah.
She knew how to answer.
Yes.
Well, that's the interesting thing too, is a lot of times these Gentiles, they come and they know, it's like they know who Jesus is, and it's like Jesus is looking around at the Jewish nation and so forth and saying, what's wrong with you guys? Why can't y'all get it whenever they're getting it? So.
Kind of like what my footnote says about it. It says, what seems to be a deliberate insult may have been intended to draw out the woman's faith and show Jesus' disciples that she should not be sent away as inferior or unworthy of God's blessing. Children's meaning lost sheep of Israel. The bread means God's covenanted blessings, and dogs an insult referring to Gentiles. But Jesus points out that the gospel was given first to the Jews, and the woman understood Jesus' implication, but was willing to settle for the crumbs. So he rewarded her faith.
Yeah.
But the woman is far superior in her understanding to even his disciples at this point, I believe. And there were very likely Gentiles that were like this.
Mm-hmm.
And so while they're having this discussion, he's talking from the construct of society that these disciples are living in. He's talking the way they want to talk to her. But drawing her out, and they have this conversation back and forth, and turns out she understands far better than anybody guessed.
Yeah.
And my, who's the dogs today? The gospel's for all. The gospel is freely given. And so she absolutely, for what she wanted, she was willing to accept that second position or whatever, but in doing so, I just think she,
Yeah.
I think we read this sometimes, or, we think, how can this stuff be? Well, back then, one group hated another group.
Yeah.
And it was very real, it was just, so rich, I suppose, but this is, I think she was just so out in front.
Yeah, I think you're right. Did you have something?
The demon possession, is probably its own little topic, but, Jesus, I don't think he ever didn't cast out a demon when he knew that there was one that needed attention.
Yeah.
The apostles did some of it, sometimes they needed help too, but, Jesus, I think, always dealt with it. And, so perhaps she even saw some of this happening before, and we're halfway through the book here of Matthew. Maybe it's been seen or talked about already, and she knows Jesus is the only one that's gonna help me.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. I think she does. She's seen and heard a lot like the others, and I think like Don says, she's got a really good understanding of Jesus, something maybe even better than even his own disciples do. Because it does. Like I said, it shocks me and surprises me a little bit that they're like, send her away, get rid of her, and they don't even try to kind of defend her or kind of take up for her at all. But yeah, I think you're exactly right.
I think it gives hope to the fact that God has always seen everyone, not just the Jews. Because in Luke chapter 4, verse 25 through 27, it's talking about that widow of Zarephath that Elijah was sent to, and she took care of him. Well, that was not a Jewish person. It says there were many widows, but he was only sent for that one, and she wasn't one of their people. And also it says that there were many lepers in Israel at the time of Elisha, but Naaman the Syrian was healed. So he was always seeing all these people.
Yeah, that's a really good point too. Yeah, you have these examples, the same idea. Yeah, that's really good. So, one of the challenges in today's world is I think sometimes people get put out by Christianity, or they get put out with the church because of the way they're treated by some of the disciples of Jesus. And sometimes we do something wrong. Sometimes we do things wrong. We don't always do everything perfectly. I go back to the fact that we have this situation here where the disciples are saying, send her away, send her off. And to me, that they're making it hard for this woman to come to Jesus. The disciples are making it hard for this woman to come to Jesus. And yet, because she recognized that this is the true place. This is the place I need to go, the place I need to be. This is the power. This is where I get the blessing. This is the Lord. And no, I'm not going to be discouraged from begging or entreating or serving him, regardless of how he or the disciples speak to me. So I just think that that's something too. When you look at the disciples, and we need to make sure that we, as Christ's disciples, are never making it hard for people to come to Jesus. We don't ever want to be that thing that blocks people from getting to Jesus. And one last thing before we leave, I know before we wrap up here. I think about the contrast between this woman and the Pharisees and the scribes. You know, Jesus says nothing offensive in these last couple of paragraphs. He just teaches them. He's teaching truth. He's just speaking truth. And yet the Pharisees are offended. They get offended. And now he comes to this Gentile woman, and frankly, he says something that is very offensive. And, there's, some folks like to argue, well, back then it wasn't so bad or whatever. But no, that was offensive. I mean, it's offensive to be called a dog, right? Whether it was common or not, that's still offensive. But she doesn't take offense. She doesn't take offense. And kind of like what Donnie was saying before, she was okay with taking her place where she needed to be. She did not take offense to that because she knew where the blessing was. She knew where to get that blessing. Now, this of course doesn't justify mistakes that we as Christians have made, and it certainly doesn't justify if we're purposefully offending people with things that we're doing. But I'll tell you what it does do. It points out to every person out there that, Jesus may do some things, and the things that he does may offend. Jesus' disciples may do some things that offend. But still, this is where the blessing is. Jesus is where the blessing is. And you have to hang on to him no matter what. And you can't let what somebody else does, even if they're a Christian, even if they're a disciple of Jesus, you can't let their actions keep you from hanging on to the one who's going to actually give you the blessings. So you can't ditch the whole thing just because somebody makes you mad or somebody upsets you, a Christian upsets you.
We know Jesus didn't offend her because that would have been sin. To offend somebody is sin. So we know that she was not offended by anything Jesus said. Is that not true?
I have to think on that one. I might have to think about that one.
If I offend you, I've sinned. I was sinning.
I know that we are not supposed to be out there just purposely trying to offend people.
Yeah.
I know we will offend people based on our actions and the things that we're doing, like we talked about before. Light offends darkness, and it's not because we're out there trying to offend anybody, but because we're trying to do what we're supposed to be doing. People are going to take offense to that. So in that sense, we will be offending folks. I know we're not sinning in doing that. I think it is wrong though if you're purposefully going out and you're trying to offend people. But I don't know. I know that Jesus, when he was doing what he was doing here, I think there is so much going on that we don't see. Like we're talking about how he knows the hearts of the people around. He knows how far he can kind of push her and in order for her to be able to demonstrate her faith and so forth. So he kind of has that insight, which is good. But I just have to think on that a little bit more.
So it's possible for us to offend someone and not be guilty of being offensive.
Yeah. Because if you're doing the right thing, we've all been guilty of that, of where all we're trying to do is live the way we're supposed to, and because we're not out drinking or partying, somebody's going to be like, well, you just think you're better than me, and they get all offended and upset. So yeah, I think you will definitely offend some folks if you're living the way you're supposed to. And it's not because you're trying to, it's just because the light offends the darkness.
I think the Pharisees were offended by him.
Yeah, I think they were too. It says they were offended, right?
Who was it that said, you're my enemy because I tell you the truth? Like, was that Jesus or one of the apostles?
I think so.
So whenever you
I don't remember where, but I don't remember where, but I think I remember.
I mean, like you said, if you tell the truth, some people don't like it.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of people call the Church of Christ a cult.
Mhm.
And if you tell them different,
Well, look at what they called Jesus. They called him the Prince of Demons, or that he had his power by the Prince. So yeah, if they're calling, if they're, you go ahead, Larry, buddy. If they're calling Jesus that, then they're gonna, they're definitely gonna be calling us some names. I'm certain.